It's a late weekend night in the mid-2010s. You boot up your computer and decide that tonight's the perfect night for some spooky games. You don't have the highest end machine, but you refuse to let that stop you from giving yourself nightmares. What to do? You log into Newgrounds. As you browse the fine selection of games, something surreal catches your eye. A little indie horror game called Antumbra. Warning. This game has content which many can find offensive and or disturbing. Also, the game is very hard and unforgiving, so don't be surprised to have problems solving the riddles. This is not Flappy Bird or casual genocide. In order to finish it, you will need to think outside of the box. Don't get used to any rules of the game as they constantly change, bend, and twist. Think of it as the Dark Souls of adventure games. You will fail over and over. Get used to it. It's fine. Everything you will experience is exactly as planned. And remember, there is always a solution. We start our adventure in a dungeon. It smells like death itself, and there is scratching that seems to be getting closer. The game plays out like your typical point and click. We get 3 options here, with 2 of them leading to your immediate demise, and a visit from the dungeon monster. Luckily, restarting isn't a big deal. At least not yet. Choosing to run forward, we find ourselves in a metal vault, and the thing that killed us the first time seems to be hot on our trail. We get another 3 options, all leading to different directions, but they ultimately lead to our end. I won't lie, I spent a bit of time dying repeatedly here, until I remembered those words from the warning. There is always a solution, followed by the eye icon. Like many point-and-click adventure-style games, you need to focus on more than just the text, and hovering over this button here reveals our first solution, and this will be the easiest one. We click the door switch, and the doors close behind us, successfully avoiding another encounter with the creature and surviving for just a little while longer. But our celebration is cut short when we enter another hallway, which seems to be filled with things that aren't too happy that we're here. During the beginning of the game, I wasn't as aware of the mechanics and hints as I should have been, so instead of trying to figure out the riddle in this first section, I just spam clicked and stepped forward as many times as I could before the shadow creature ate me. So for my next attempt, I thought maybe going the other way would lead to an easier path, because that makes sense, right? Unfortunately, we're met with a haunting sight as we come face to face with whatever this is. Our path is obstructed by this obsessive man. Don't go there, please. You can't. You will be hurt. I won't let you go. I love you so much. You are everything that I have. And if you think this is disturbing, we can't get past him until we select the only other option, which is to punch the creature. This felt wrong, especially because of how worried it seems to be about our safety. And it gets even worse every action after, with our characters seemingly taking satisfaction in beating the mysterious entity. Punches turn to kicks, and kicks into more violent actions, until finally, we end it. He is an obstacle no more. Ecstasy overwhelms your body and mind. With our dark deeds completed, it appears we can finally progress. It looks like maybe this game won't be as hard as I imagined. We just have to be willing to get our hands dirty. But oh man, how wrong I was. Taking a right at these crossroads leads us to our son. But why is he here? Why are we here? And what did he get himself into? The obvious reaction here is to save him, or I would assume that's what a lot of us would do. But we can't actually get to him, and the dialogue here makes sure to let us know that. Sorry, little man. Can't say we didn't give it a go. Going left jump scared me, with this horrifying creature littered with eyes frantically pacing back and forth. I tried to make small talk with it, but to no avail. All this managed to do was freak me out, but at least it doesn't seem to block our path forward, and we enter into an even more uncomfortable situation. Entering the cabin, we meet Pride. The embodiment is nothing short of disturbing, and the noises in this section make it even worse. There's not much that can be done here, other than self-deprecate, it seems, and trying to be snarky with it doesn't seem to faze the thing. Eventually, the conversation comes to an end, with our protagonist surrendering and ending this run. What you should know about this game is that dying will restart the entire game. There are no checkpoints, so eventually this becomes a game of memorization. This is the part where the two Antumbra veterans watching this would be ripping their hair out. The number of times I unalived this poor creature and was then met with the same fate in the cabin is the definition of Einstein's quote about insanity. I don't know why I kept doing it. Nothing was going to change, but I couldn't figure it out. After about 25 minutes of trial and error, I came to an incredible realization. One that finally allowed me to move on to the next part of the game. I realized there was a walkthrough. I only took a little peek, and I made sure to only look at it if I was really stuck. Unfortunately, I'm not clever enough to figure out these types of games all on my own, and if I tried, this video would be way too long. As it turns out, going into the cabin, at least in the way I was attempting, was pointless. We'll come back to it later though, because you can actually visit it without having to face pride. After closing the door and avoiding the dungeon monster, we're supposed to traverse the hallway with the shadow creature, but there's a pattern here. If the dialogue shows that there's a violent knocking, you have to observe until it says that the corridor is silent, and you can only hear your own breathing. When you get this prompt, you can step forward safely, and you do this until you get to the end of the corridor. At the end, you fall into water, or what appears to be water at least. Swimming back up lands us on the beach. And I know what you're thinking, how relaxing, but this isn't a beach like you're imagining. We haven't suddenly transported ourselves to Delfino Plaza. This is a beach littered in horrors. In the beach, you find the Archangel, who reveals some morbid information, but that's not even the worst of it. Look, I'm not one to judge, but I'll let you listen to the next part, and you'll see why I had to play this with headphones. All of this followed by a message that reads, "I am lazy, but violence and pain motivate me. If you want me to flap my wings and fly, you need to hurt me. Don't worry, I enjoy it." Alright, this is obviously a riddle, but I'm a little uncomfortable, so we'll come back later. Choosing to go to the jungle proves to be a more viable alternate path than the cabin route. We start by interacting with this snake here, and it seems that it wants some pets, but in an attempt to avoid having to restart the game, we'll just go a bit deeper into the jungle. We are met with a tall wall of fire, and unfortunately, there's no way around it, at least not one that we can see on screen. I can't tell you why I thought this was a good idea to try to walk past it, but I was too scared to pet the snake, so here we are. So we start the game over again, but fortunately, we've learned from our mistakes, so we can quickly speedrun our way back to the solution in no time. Honestly, the worst part about starting over so far is the corridor here, and only because there's sort of a waiting involved with it, since you have to move forward when the prompt allows you to. Alright, since the fire charred us, let's see if we can pet the snake, and open up some mysterious alternate path. Okay, as you've probably noticed by now, each game over reveals to us a different name. I was curious about this, so I decided to do some digging, but as it turns out, there's no real mystery to it. The developer chose a list of the most common names in hopes of creeping out players should their name happen to coincide with the on-screen one. Alright, let's try something else. Going back to the Archangel and, excuse me for saying this, but giving it to him allows us to visit heaven. But we aren't so lucky, and we're unable to get in. The gates are closed. It seems that we still have quite a bit of work to do before we can finally rest and leave behind what's left of the world we once knew. But what? If you remember, the game was oddly specific when it came to describing the water, and right after emerging, you can immediately head to the jungle. If you do this fast enough, the jelly-like water on your clothes will allow you to walk through the fire without being burned, opening up the next section. The crossroads. At this fork, we get two new locations, the desert and the swamp. We should take our time to decide here. The last thing we want to do is have to start over again. Did we just beat the game? What am I even playing anymore, man? Let's start with the swamp. Here, we meet this interesting looking snake creature, but like most things so far, I don't think we have what we need to crack this riddle quite yet. It appears that we need to exchange a name for a name. maybe the desert has what we're looking for. Each time we click keep going, an insane amount of time goes by, jumping from not even a full year to a full 40 years before divine intervention kicks in. Surely this, along with the fact that we can just game over and restart everything, means that we're in purgatory. After a long, arduous journey, we reach a desolate city. The sewers and the hospital open as new areas of exploration. I think we'll fare better in the hospital, so let's see what we can find. Upon entering, we make our way to a series of doors, each labeled by a different number, 17, 9, and 3. If you're confused, don't worry, so was I. I honestly had no idea which door was safe, and which wasn't, if any were to begin with. The ceiling here also gives us an ominous note. This isn't a game, this is real. I make my best guess and choose door number 3, where somehow the sights continue to get even more eerie than the last. It's here where we seem to slip into a psychotic break, being tortured by something that refers to itself as God, before we inevitably, but unsurprisingly, meet our end. Back to the start. At least we're earning achievements along the way. It kind of makes every failure a little easier to swallow. At this point, I was stuck, so I took another small little peek at the guide and found out that our next area of interest is the swamp. Here, we have to focus on some very important words. If you look close enough, you can see some irregularities in the backdrop. Movement in the air that when clicked on reveals the eye maggots. There are 3 of these eyes that you need to find, each with a set of syllables. Alone, they seem like nothing but nonsense, but when you combine them, you get the name we've been searching for, Heber. This is the name of the snake in the swamp. However, upon revealing this information, Heber informs us that they actually don't remember his name, which I believe may be a reference to God. But while we don't get the answer here, we do get a key, metaphorically speaking, that opens up our path. Man, it seems to be the Archangel's lucky day, because we have to once more hitch a ride up to heaven by well, you know what he wants. With Heber's recommendation, we get another name, Iskalian. We need to find him and make him remember. All we need to do is find door number 6, and our mission, our suffering, is complete. Unfortunately, you get to witness my ineptitude for just a little while longer. Upon crossing the desert and once again arriving in front of the 3 doors in the hospital, I noticed that none of them were labeled door number 6. If you can see the solution at this moment, I applaud you, because I decided that the door had to be elsewhere, so I went into the sewers and ended up looping back around to the crossroads, only to come back to the desert and use the logic. Well, 3 is pretty close to 6, so before I choose the wrong door and have to start over, I searched and I searched for the fabled door number 6, to no avail. I began to wonder if it even existed. Maybe the game wasn't complete. Maybe the real door was the friends we made along the way. But that can't be the case, because there have been dozens of players that have finished it. Okay, one last time, I'll allow myself to look at the guide, and what do you know? The door was there all along. We're finally at the end, except one little detail. I skipped right to the door without remembering that the game reset, so while I do know the name, we can't use it because the game thinks that we don't know the name. Just hold, please. Finally, the end. We enter the name. And we're free. This game was interesting to say the least, but in a good way. Even if you're not a fan of point-and-click adventures, if you're anything like me, you may be able to appreciate the bizarre characters, the artwork, and the surreal atmosphere. The developer wasn't lying in that it was a hard game, not like Elden Ring or Dark Souls or anything like that, but in that you do have to think outside of the box and analyze every little bit of dialogue if you want to find the solutions fair and square. Oh, before I forget, the cabin. If you go back to the cabin and wait for the monster here to go off screen before you enter, you'll actually come in contact with this old woman who gives you clues, which sometimes are helpful and sometimes not, in exchange for maggots' teeth that you can collect from smashing them in her basement. These things are a little disturbing for sure, so just know that you'll have to get used to hearing this if you want to play the game how it was intended. This part of the game isn't required. It's interesting to see. I also tried to unlock all the achievements and got really close, but unfortunately it's kind of impossible according to some because some of the triggers don't work. I think specifically the ones that lead you to the social medias, which unlock an achievement. And one last thing before I go, I came across the dev's YouTube channel after I wishlisted the sequel on Steam. Unfortunately, it looks like the game may not be happening due to some financial roadblocks. Though he seems to have given up, he is throwing out one last Hail Mary to try and fund his game. To be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of the approach specifically in this little section here. I don't like the tone, but I can understand that this may just be because of frustrations, and I won't hold it against the guy. The tricky thing with fundraisers is that there is a risk of donating to the project, and it may still not happen, as we've all probably seen. Nonetheless, I chipped in a little bit, and if you want to as well, just remember to please do so at your own risk and only if you believe in the project and want to help this guy out. That being said, he did release a trailer for the sequel, so at least there is some proof of concept here. Well, I think that's all I had for this video. Thank you so much for exploring this surreal indie horror game with me. Have you played Antumbra? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know if you enjoyed it or not. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to stick around. I'd love to have you, and as always, I will see you in the next one.